Hello and welcome to episode 178 of the Imperial Truth podcast. My name's Greg. Joining me, as usual, is Mr. Howard. Hello, Howard.
Hello, Greg. How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, not bad. Yourself?
Yeah, just recovering from our busy weekend, but looking and feeling pretty good right now.
Indeed, that's cool. This is a special episode. We will talk about Element Games because they are wonderful supporters of the show. You can buy all your new toys, including your copy of The Great Slaughter and various other bits and plasticky pieces from Element. And if you do that in the pre-order period, you get 20% off usually. So go and head over there if you want to support the show. Should I say, go and head via our link, which is in the show notes and various places online. If you ever do want the link and you don't know where to look for it, you can always email or tweet or what have you, whatever you want, to all the usual places, which are also in the show notes as well. So just to let you know that. Brilliant. That's Element Games done. We are here as you may have guessed, it's a special episode. We were sent a copy of the rulebook or the expansion book for Legion Imperialis called The Great Slaughter, the death of Nurkon, depends on where you are in the world.
Yeah, Neocon.
Nyakon,
Probably not Niacon.
Yeah.
Nyrcon.
Pronounce
Your
it
mileage
however
may
you wish
vary.
to pronounce it. Yeah, I probably should have asked Andy actually how it's pronounced, but maybe I'll do that next
He
time.
may not.
Who
He
knows?
may not have known.
Indeed. So, just one thing: the the way they send these digital copies to us, they're not really usable going forwards. So they send them in a way which I don't know. It's still right for you. You've got a decent program to look at them, but for me, it's a little bit of a pain to search through. So if we do
It's
have some
certainly
moments,
it's not like a regular document, and it's one that's designed
no,
to assist with just a preview, and that's fine. It just
yeah,
gives
exactly.
people ability to get things ready ahead of time, which is all fine. But as you say, it's certainly not optimized for usability.
No, and that, yeah, as you say, there's no point in doing that in the way that they're doing them to make sure that there are no leaks and things like that. It's absolutely fair and understandable. But for this, when I'm looking stuff up, because although we've had it for a little bit of time, we've had lots of other stuff going on. So trying to go and keep it all in, look up everything is not always the easiest. Fair play to the other people who can do it much better than us. But we can't, so whatever. Brilliant. But I will be there when this records. I will be hopefully ordered my copy when this releases.
I have heard that they are quite strictly limited. This is one that this might be worth diving to Games Workshop directly, or for certainly trusted partners, or friendly local gaming stores. But I've heard that the independents have got quite strictly limited quantities, at least in the first instance. So it would be one that certainly you want to jump on sooner rather than later. Pre-order day for sure, I would say,
I
if
don't know
this
if
is
they're
something of
doing.
interest.
I'm trying to remember if they're doing a digital copy of it or not.
I don't think they are.
But there we go. So yes. Anyway, this is the first expansion that we've seen for Legions Imperialis, and it tells the story of the Great Slaughter is another name for the Beta Garmin
Theatre.
theatre. That's
Yes.
a good word. Yes, and expands greatly on that. Just quickly for those who aren't aware, Beta Garmin is the Titan Death and all the other names it's got given. Is something they came up with, or I think it's been around a while, but it was brought to higher prominence at a Black Library weekend, or was it a Heresy weekend? I think it might have been a Heresy weekend.
The first time I remember it was a Heresy Weekender showing a roadmap, effectively, or a timeline, I should say.
And was they kind of left it for Forge World to cover it in the Black Books. And then they were talking about novels, and someone was like, are we going to find out more about this? And almost there in that moment, they kind of realised actually we do need to cover it a bit more. So You do have the Titan Death novel. You do have elements of it within Adeptus Titanicus and written down within Heresy, but it's quite limited. The viewpoints of that, like Titan Death covers two legions and one's major battle, really. I'm trying to remember exactly what's covered. The AT book is nowhere near as detailed as this. So, yeah, this is our first real deep dive into this theatre of war.
Yeah, and as we've said before, I mean, we've had the announcement, obviously, of the Age of Darkness, a book set in the same location.
We have, yeah.
This is obviously the first that's going to be diving into it in detail. And I was excited for it for that reason, because to have this kind of treatment, a true source book set on something in that area, I think is very exciting. And I think they've done, spoiler alert, I think they've done quite a good job with this one. I was excited when they gave the preview of it and the way they covered it, and thought there's a lot of background in here. The rules are very useful, and the game mode that they introduce in this, I think, is a very interesting and intriguing concept. And yeah, I think they've done a good book. Should we go through it in the order it's presented?
So first off, Peter Garman is essentially, it's important because it's one of the stable warp routes that leads to Terra, one of the gateways to Terra, as you will, and it's fairly close, and it's surrounded by quite important places as well. Peter Garman holds a very significant position within all of that, and it's also kind of one of the last places of being a huge bastion before Terra as well. So
it's a cluster, isn't it? It's not.
Yes.
It's not a single system. It is a collection of things, of which Beta Garmin is the capital. It's a collection of systems, which this goes into, including, we all love a map, and there's several of them in this. And it sort of zooms in to varying degrees, but it certainly does set up this why Beta Garmin is significant, and even build up to it.
Yeah, even going back to talking about where are we? It was something about it being one of the pinnacle places from which the Great Crusades ventured forth, a shining jewel of the Imperium's effort to bring the Emperor's light to the galaxy. So, fundamentally important because of location, because of what is there as well. In terms of kind of how important the manufacturing and all that kind of stuff was as well, and made more important because it had to be taken. Dawn then chooses to play his cards here in an attempt to, at the very least, bleed Horus dry before he gets to Terra, so that the fight on Terra becomes less destructive, but also gives them more chance of winning.
Yes, the background, I want to sort of jump into this. The thing that slightly surprised me with this is I hadn't, up until this point, I'd sort of assumed, the Titan death occurs here, and I knew there was a very large war. But this book makes it quite clear that there are very different phases to that war, of which the Titan death is one. I hadn't appreciated that until I'd read this. The Great Slaughter is a phase, and the Titan death follows it, not necessarily immediately follows it. There are many battles and many conflicts that take place. It's a bit like with Paramar, which is a nearby system, and it's significant. That system's significance sort of becomes clearer. But the idea that this changes hands a few times, and there are numerous conflicts there. There's some early on, and this goes into some of that. But the section that this really focuses on, the Great Slaughter, is sort of later heresy. It's early days of Horus's move on Terra.
Yeah.
The Titan death comes later. The Titan death is not covered in the background section of this. This ends, and the Titan death comes later.
Which makes
Titan
sense.
Death, yes, it does. Yeah, and the Titan death is covered, as you say, in other in other books. It's covered in the Titanicus book, but not to the depth that this covers by any stretch. There's a lot of background of this and the conflict.
The beauty of this is that adds in, you can just add time and death onto the end of this. You've got a background that leads up to that then. But yeah, there is a lot. So fully half the book is, the background section. I'm just trying to get up to, the campaign starts page 70-ish, 71.
Yeah, 70-ish,
So, that's the first half of the book is background, story, who was there, all that kind of juicy stuff that you can really get into if you want to theme an army, you want to create an army around a specific event, and then can influence your gaming as well going through.
It's really sort of inspiring the way it's presented as well. I take these as significant inspiration for this. The way you've got maps, you've got force dispositions being described, how things are moving at what times, who's arriving and when, particularly as it's such a chaotic battle, if you like, or a chaotic war zone where different fleets and different groups are moving in at different times. There's a very good timeline in here as well that focuses particularly on this, as well as some of the larger moves around it. I think it's presented in a very, it's in a post Black Books way. I think it's actually a very contemporary way of presenting something, and I thought I got a very good picture of what happened at Neocon City, being the capital of Beta Garmin.
Yeah, I get why Titanicus has the books it has. I think I get that. But with the Heresy one we got and Cathonia, and then this is, we're not going to get these limited, these leather bound huge books that are, can be quite intimidating to just purchase. These are a happy medium between the two.
I think that's a fair description of it, and I was pleasantly surprised. Although having seen Siege of Cathonia, that I thought was a very good job. That was a very thorough background. This has been created with considerable passion, I think. Just reading the background, I have read it sort of cover to cover in terms of the background section, and I really enjoyed it, and it could easily withstand that reading. And I could see me referring back to it. It's not got the vast range of color plates that we might have seen with some of those. It does have a couple with vehicles, and it's certainly got a lot of artwork in it, some of which is new because it's Legions. So it's covering that sort of large tanks, Titans in the background, that combined arms feel. But in terms of the written word, it's also very narrative driven. I thought the way it describes it, you've got the sweep of it, and I think that's quite an interesting take, rather than it's a mixture of a narrative and a historic take.
Yeah, and I think the old world feels a little bit like this as well, and I think Legions and old world are going to be played. It was an interesting kind of discussion. I don't know if it was with you or whoever at the weekend, but Heresy was very lucky in the way that it was born, that maybe put people off and maybe created issues. But being the Forge World Big Black Books, they the way that Alan had written it, and maybe the way that he was allowed to write it then, which couldn't have happened at any other time, and maybe not many other people than Alan. But it was unequivocally narrative. Legions and particularly and AT tend to be, or there's this view of or a competitive scene happening and tournaments and things like that. But it feels to me in this writing that that's not. It's not. I don't want to say that's not the way to play it. You play the game however you want, but it feels to me more of a narrative game than anything else.
Because of the almost the weighting within this book, because of the presentation of, as you say, 50% of this book being a story, they didn't need to dedicate that amount to it, and there's a lot of ground it covers, and it's presented with a great deal. This doesn't feel rushed to me at all. This feels like a real labour of love, the way they've put this together. It's the sort of thing you would very much want to put together if you were doing something like this. A big dream project kind of thing. I mean, having icons of legions sweeping around and doing things, and the descriptive nature of
I mean,
some of these types of assaults are good, are really exciting things.
you can argue that like 40k is this strong tournament, not bias, but feed in that, looking at points and stuff. They're always going to do narrative and story because it's the way GW work, but they also have a lot of background in them. These do feel slightly different to that. I feel. Hey, and partly, mainly, probably because it's about an event rather than here's an army book with some background on an army. This is Peter Garman. This is what happened here roughly. These are the kind of battles that happened. Oh, by the way, to help you play some of those kind of battles, here's some scenarios and some new rules for toys we're bringing out, but feed into uh, the narrative of the location, and maybe that's where Heresy with Cathonia and this Titanicus is a bit different because they were much thinner, but maybe that's why it feels more narrative.
I think the game lends itself to, I mean, what used to be collectively called specialist games, things that are outside that core game, if you like, and notionally Age of Darkness has become one of those core games as well. I could say just because of its the scale of the models. Because of the nature of this as a combined arms type of game, the scope of those games, the background seems to have lent into that as well, because obviously the background is there to paint a picture of why are you playing this game? What story are you telling by playing this game? As a result, it's got a sweep to it, a grandeur to it that, I mean, it's one of the things that attracts me to Legion's Imperialis. The epic scale is what got me into wargaming in the first place. Why I've got a soft spot for this particular scale of game and type of game. But I think the background in particular has done that justice. Whereas some of the others perhaps focus in, you see the 40k book or even in some of the Age of Darkness, but Siege of Cathonia, it's revolved around more about the characters.
Yeah, I think,
and which makes sense, and that's great. You get a character driven thing. This is forces doing things. Yeah, there's mention of certain commanders, but
so
it's bigger sweep.
the main character here is the location.
Yes.
Whereas if you're doing a codex about an army, you need, the character of the Space Force is the character, but who defines that character? The key named people within it. When we're talking about Beta Garman, Nurcon City, it's going to get me every time. It becomes a major character in the book, and the events around it. Population 3 billion. Oh, you gotta love Games Workshop 40k scales. 3 billion living in one city. Loving it. But yeah, I think locations and battles, specific battles, become like you talk about the Urgal Depression. For a big battle, you talk about the attack on Prospero. You talk about the defense of the space spaceport. That kind of thing become almost the characters rather than the people involved, especially at this scale. Like, what does it matter about? What does it matter about? I don't know. Eidolon. Nothing. Apart from the fact he might be leading a force of warriors as a general, his actions actually on the battlefield mean nothing. His tactical nouns, yeah, maybe, but it's cool.
I thought the background was really well presented, and I would encourage anyone picking this up to give that the time that you might want
what they
to be able to
do,
really sit down and enjoy it.
if you want to play like the whole battle, then they have a Vanguard host rule. These little sidebars of the kind of level of forces that take part, and they're only vague, obviously. 12,000 Sons of Horus, 5,000 World Eaters.
See, I think those disposition things are really cool.
They are
I
cool.
really enjoy those.
32 Knights from House Divine, 38 from House Athane. You would spell EGM would be Thane, wouldn't it?
Which page? Which page are you on?
Yeah. That is page 20 in the book. House Malinax is there. Legio modules. And for those people who need that tie-in, that like official in Bunny is tying, this gives you Sons of Horus Body is Death Guard, Alpha Legion, Chthonian Headhunters, some Regiments of Dark Compliance, some other 3.2 million other fighters, and then Divine, Athane, Malinax, Mortis, Vulpa. We're all there on the bad guy side. So if you want to be as historically accurate as possible for whatever value that has, then you know you're not going to go wrong if you've got some Mortis weapons fighting there. That's fine. There's also scope because it's not exhaustive. There's scope to have everything else, of course. And then on the other side, on page 27, we've got Imperial Fist 92nd Provisional Crusade, Blood Angels, Iron Hands, Saturnine Rams, the Theta Garmin Deathless. Sounds so cool. Regiments of Secundus Levy, 1st, 2nd, and 5th Nemesis Brigades, Pancryptia Brigades, Christoris House of Veroni, and Legio Astorum. Like, plenty of, again, in there. And that's during the second valiant defence of the stronghold. So the first one, obviously, they're moments in time as much as anything else. Yeah, this is the second valiant defence and the second. So if you want to play that battle, you've got a good choice of more kind of appropriate forces or definite guides towards what you can have.
I'm glad there's not too much. Something I've seen creep into certain, or it seems to be more prominent in some of the more contemporary background books or background sections of books, the lore sections, is that if that book has a particular focus on, well, this is some new stuff that we're going to have, I can sort of see the logic to say, and therefore we'd like to tell you about it. And you think that's fine, but it sort of took me out of it slightly when you're like, okay, yeah, there's another mention of that thing that I know this book is happened to be about. For argument's sake, and they all travel in Spartans, and the Spartan is and Spartans do anything. All right, yeah, chill out. I get it, but there are other things here as well. And I thought the older publications were more even-handed in that they didn't need to focus on specific things, even if that book featured some new units. I feel like that's a bit of a direction they've taken things. I didn't feel this suffered from that too much. There's a smidge of it. There's a few fast-moving companies I mentioned, and they're all mounted on jet bikes and things. And you think, oh, that's coming. That's introduced essentially with this book, and I'm sure that's not. But it didn't feel as forced. I thought they got the balance about right here. There is an element of it, but not ones that took me out of the book, took me out of the narrative, so to speak. But in terms of it setting the scene of Beta Garmin, I think it succeeds.
Sure. There's also, so by having a cluster of events, that means people are moving around more, things like that. But there's not like, from what I could read through, there's not like, oh, this is all about deep striking your
no, exactly.
armies in. Like, it just so happens that 4 of the battles are fought like this. Yeah, it's very much a more balanced approach, and it's quite a big scale as well. Yeah, that's the beauty of it over time, as well as regions in space. The little cutout boxes are always really good, really with GW. Well, most of the time, pretty good. Have you read the Burden of Duty one?
I have, but I'm going to quote it now.
Just to pull out some of the flavor text that's in here. Basically, I'm not going to read it all, but Lady Vile, who's manning the defences, is refusing to give the orders that will lead to the slaughter of her, thousands, tens of thousands of people, and in the end, she sends all the officers away, so she can't give the order. And then there's there's an ident. If you look at the records, you can see the ident code of a Space Marine being put in to gain access to that room. And then after 3 minutes, there's an announcement over the Vox, like about do your duty, like basically, and then that ident code being used to leave, and then the order is to fire is given.
Yeah.
It's like, and the accent of Inuit. So there's a what's interesting is they don't name it. So there's an Imperial Fist in there, or potentially someone else pretending to be an Imperial Fist. But yeah, like those flavor texts are really good, and it's quite detailed. Almost reminds me a little bit more of like Vrax in the way that it's
yes, I
written,
agree.
because it's one, like it's a set series of specific battles rather than a bigger one.
It's organised in an interesting way because it's broken into chapters, I suppose you could call it. It's broken into sections, and it's your first 4 are sequences within this conflict. Let's say it's not a battle; it's a series of considerable series of battles that plays through over the first 4 parts. The 5th part, it describes the forces that were there and gives you a bit more information, not only about them as when you have the first section of the hosts of the Great Slaughter is part 5.
Yes.
The first of those, the loyalist hosts, and it runs you through those that were present, why they were present, how they were perceived, what they did, just as pieces of text. With then illustrated, it does the same then for the traitor hosts that were there, a few color images of tanks, and then it moves on to the campaigns from there.
Yeah, they're quite nice. You've got what essentially each page has two factions within it. So Fists and Blood Angels on the first one, and then the Blood Angels get a full wall of text. The Fists have, almost a full page of text, and you do that for like 6 or so different factions, and then the same for the traitors as well. So again, information which is cool, stories, all adding to the story, which is cool. But also, if you then want to have your you're forced to be the Arcadian Janissaries, then you've got that bit more information to feed into how you build your army, maybe, or what have you. What is it called? Super cool. Should we move on
once the lore section is done, yes, the next section is the campaigns section, which is probably the section I have spent least time with. Have you?
Well, I've briefly run over it. So you said campaigns, and that's because there are 2, Warfront and Conquest campaigns.
Yes.
So they've put in key concepts here for running a campaign of any type. Things like potentially having a campaign master, or if they can be like independent, then that's amazing. But if not, like someone involved in the campaign, but someone who makes the final decisions, that kind of thing. Campaign cycles being periods of time in which you get to fight. So really laying out, like, if you've never played a campaign before, like you want factions to be equalish as much as possible. Campaign cycles is like, we've got to play your game within this 2-week period. Otherwise, campaigns fizzle and die, and that happens very easily for a myriad of reasons. Campaign points, which you can earn for various kind of aspects of the game, but end up usually from winning battles and controlling territory, that kind of thing. Requisition points, which are a resource that you can earn during the game to spend to grant bonuses in games, and then basically there's a question here on choosing a format, which the Warfront and Conquest campaigns are different types of format. Yeah, I mean, let's break it down then. Warfront campaign, we're talking about a limited, this is kind of what they suggest, depending on how many players you've got, depending on how much time you've got, depending on how reliable you've got, all those kind of things you can expand and retract and adjust. And these are frameworks for, this is a brilliant idea. If you've never played a campaign before, you've got 4 of you who want to play. Let's play Warfront campaign. Cool. Play out the book. Have a go. As you're more experienced, when you know what works, what doesn't work for people, you can shift it up. And it's even got designer notes in there for that. But
I thought that was a nice touch to put that in, sort of explaining,
yeah,
guiding you in, if you will.
I can I can foresee now some conversations on certain discords where people are like, "Oh, why are they putting this in box?" And it's like, "Well, that's not for you." You know, as you've been gaming for 20 odd years, then the chances are you don't need to be told to. You can shorten a campaign, but sometimes people. We said it here on many times. Sometimes people almost have to be officially allowed to break the rules because of the way their mind works, or because they haven't done it before, so they're a bit worried. So it doesn't hurt to spend a chapter telling people that cool, mix it up, do what you want, whatever works for you guys. Within that. So warfare campaigns feature determining battles. So each player gets paired with a player of another faction, and also you draw your mission at this time. Then you muster your armies. You're talking about 3,000 points here. Again, doesn't really matter what you do. You can then spend your requisition points if you've earned any through the campaign. And then guess what? You fight your battles, determining a winner and a loser, and then you assign your reward. So in this case, victorious players gain 3 campaign points and d6 times 15 requisition points. If you're tied, you get 1 and d6 times 15. And if you lose, you get no campaign points, but d6 times 10 requisition points. So not a massive difference there. Yeah, you can potentially earn a lot more requisition points for losing, just because you roll a 6 on your d6 and the winner rolls a 1 on their d6.
Yeah.
Which, one major issue with campaigns is having runaway winners, because you win, you get more, and that seems to be a limited kind of scope on that front. Unfortunately, because it's so random, you might just get whoever rolls best does best in this step. But it's a minimal, compared to some campaigns. It's a minimal bonus. And then you get the cycle end phase to do, update points, things like that, and then you begin that campaign cycle again. And at the end of the cycle, it's really simple. Whoever has the most points wins. 6 rounds, play lots of games.
It's kind of a campaign light, isn't it? It's a way
Yeah,
of linking
very
games.
basic.
It's a way of linking games as a suggestion, but gets you into it. Particularly, as you say, if you're limited in any way, shape, or form, but still fancy doing a campaign, it's a great intro.
Very simple organisation. You don't have to all be feeding information back all the time or anything like that. It's literally like, oh, who's playing this week? Okay, Jeff's playing John. Who won? Jeff. Cool. You noted your requisition points. Crack on. Brilliant. Put that in. See who wins. It's not plenty of heresy events or a run like that on a weekend effectively. So it's not much different. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you can, at the end of the day, that's a framework. Again, these are both frameworks. If you take that first one and you write reports of battles and all kinds of things like that, then you can create a huge narrative vehicle without the need for any of the other stuff that goes into the second one. But you can do both and do that. It doesn't have to restrain you.
No.
Because conquest campaigns are basically a map campaign of sorts. So this one being hex maps, and they use the example that they use later on, which is of course the main fight from the book that they're doing. Why would you not? And they have a map for that, for fighting that one, which is cool. But they're talking about, we'll get into it. There's different territories. Essentially, each hex represents a territory, and those territories have special rules either within campaign or by setting scenario or setting attacker defender. Those kind of things can have all 3 within that as well. So you're fighting over specific locations. Excuse me. The idea being, when you have something like this, you have each faction has a faction commander to act as like their war master or their praetorian to kind of guide people. If you've got plenty of people in the campaign, you could have like 8 or 10 people if you want to in a campaign like this, to give it a bit of structure on both sides, also to harass them nicely on your own side to make sure you're doing your stuff. making sure everything's all right. And you start with a certain amount of territories, probably one. I'm just trying to think. It's one here. The remaining players each select a territory in turn, alternating. No, so each player, each faction commander goes first, and then you go off one by one like that, and they are your starting territories. And then there's a whole sequence for the conquest map campaign, utilizing the map. So you look at rolling a d6 again. It's GW is going to make you roll lots of d6s. Add in one if you're the winner of the previous campaign cycle, re-rolling for ties. Whoever wins is the invader. Then the invader chooses to invade territories. Each player places a token or what have you onto a hex next to one of ones where you already have a token. And essentially that goes on. The defenders then protect territories. Then you determine whose battles, because you could have 4 players, 2 from each side on a territory. So you'd say, I'll fight him. I'll fight him.
A campaign map like this, a map-based campaign is a really appealing thing. If you can organise it, you've got the people to play it, and you just say capable of playing regularly. This looks amazing.
Yeah. So I'm getting too deep in here. I'm doing the reader book thing, and it's terrible. Apologies for that. But essentially, you then play games. If you're an invader and you win on a new territory, you capture it. Way. If you're a defender and you're on a neutral territory, you can capture it, or you can defend your own territory. Bonza. You get to add those territories to your pool, and territories do stuff.
This
So
has got a feel of it. I mean, I'm looking at the example, and I like that they've included almost a worked example, like you say. It's obviously of the campaign they're talking about that is the focus of the book. I can't remember a GW game that has a campaign system that is. I mean, Necromunda is the obvious campaign-heavy comparison. That where your territories were and what they were adjacent to, generally, I mean, obviously, people could have made their own version of it up, but it didn't really matter. You could say, I'm challenging you to this, and I don't remember map-based campaigns were like this for quite some time.
GW had one.
As a
Mighty
standalone.
Empires.
Yes, exactly. So it's that sort of era, a long time ago.
They did
Before
the
that was
they
a
did
thing.
the 40k one as well, didn't they? But yeah,
Yeah, Planetary
essentially
Empires.
GW.
Yeah,
This is essentially an updated version of a Mighty Empires campaign,
yeah,
where
okay.
you control hexes. Those hexes have rules attached to them. In general, with the Mighty Empires ones, well, you could win by territories in some of the things. In some of the campaigns later on, the Blood in the Badlands campaign for Warhammer, it was based. I think there was a final battle that determined. Yeah, because you were chasing the Silver Tower. In this case, we're talking about campaign points. So 120 campaign points again. Up, move it down. You want a longer campaign, more campaign points, or you've got more players, more campaign points. Fewer players, less time, lower campaign points. Simples to win, and then to do that, it's holding territories. What's interesting with this one is they've gone a little deeper with the territories. So the territories all have a card, so they can just keep adding more on these cards. So a Titan Forge, a little bit of blurb, campaign points 3 if you control it. Its terrain type is urban medium, which means you're looking at cities or man-made areas with a medium amount of terrain. Simple. Requisition points 20. You control it in the turn, you get 20 requisition points. Simple. And then special rules. In this case, every time you muster an army, you can increase the allied contingents to 40% of the points limit instead of 30, as long as every detachment in the ally is a Legion support formation. Cool. Loads of different spaceports. 4 campaign points. They're really important. 25 requisition points. Instead of playing normal mission, you play planetary assault mission, and the player protecting the territory is always the defender. Excellent. However, if you own a spaceport, you can attack depending on what rules you're using, we'll go into those later on. It allows you to do other stuff as well. Let's have a look. Munitorium Depot, campaign points 2, requisition points 20. When you fire a weapon with the limited X special rule, you can roll a d6. On a 6, you don't decrease the value of that limited X weapon because they've loaded it up. And then down to woodlands. They're worth 1 campaign point. They have only 10 requisition points. But if you control 1 or more research facility territories and 1 or more Munitorium Depot territory, then each woodland territory counts as 2 campaign points instead of the usual 1. So everything's got just a small rule. Plains, if you're fighting on plains, they're only worth 1 campaign point. They're only worth 15 requisition points. But all your cavalry get +1 move while fighting on a plain. Some real flavour to where you're fighting to mix games up. And we were talking last episode about terrain and its effects, and I was, very strongly suggesting that we need to have variety in our gaming. I think it's a majorly important thing. This adds a lot of variety, keeps you on your
It does, and
toes.
it gives you a structure to introduce that variety and play around it. And having played the Titanicus event at the weekend, and that had quite varied tables entirely supporting and proving your point essentially just within one event. This sort of lends itself as well. I mean, you could picture the tables just inspired by these different territories. You'd be wanting to build that up, and you could do that with a core of reasonably straightforward core of terrain, but running that out on maybe on different mats, or just arranging it differently, or you have more of a industrial ruins bias for over open wasteland. You could create quite varied things, and this gives you prompts for that, which I think is great. And then a little game that's sitting above your games, like the most exciting video games of your Total Wars and similar, where you've got the map campaign and then you're into the actual individual battles.
So that's your base kind of thing. So your basic campaign is the warfare campaign, whatever it's called. I've lost the names of them now. It's good, isn't it? Yeah,
Warfront campaign.
Warfront campaign. The conquest adds a bit of complexity because you've got these hexes and you've got that kind of aspect of it. But that kind of, where you're placing your tokens can be a game within itself, which is really fun. Get everyone around the map, do it on on the start of the 2-week period or whatever when you're playing your games. It can be great fun. On top of that, for either element, you've got expansion rules here, which are ideas to add complexity and variety to your games. So there's only like 4, I think, 5, 6, something like that. So system warfare. This represents the fact that we're fighting in a system rather than on a single world, and you have different planets. They suggest 1 per player, with spaceport on each one, and you can only invade another planet if you control a spaceport. So you could end up with your planet, the enemy wins your spaceport and is coming in, and you can't fight off. You're desperately trying to gain that foothold to be able to then extend, which is quite cool, although has potential to be a bit frustrating potentially. Victory boons, which is basically you get a bonus like for it's for doing cool stuff. So each victory boon at the end of each campaign cycle, campaign master can select 1 victorious player to receive a victory boon. If you don't have a campaign master, you can have people vote, and you literally kind of roll a d6, and they go from you get 1 detachment from the army gains forward deployment, aerial superiority. Once during the next battle, the player with this victory boon may call down a bombing run. When they do, place 1 3-inch blast marker anywhere on the battlefield. Allocate a single hit to each model under the templates with an AP of -1 and the light and ignores cover trait. Cool. Or you get to roll. You get to choose your secondary objective instead of rolling for it and picking one. So just small bonuses that playing the game, but used well, will help you, but won't dictate a game by themselves, which is always the best way of doing it. What else we got here? Army markers. So in the expansion, each player's forces are represented by an army marker. You can move your army markers to friendly territories. Okay, so it's about having different armies, so you can have more than one army for each player, but there's specific kind of forces attached to those.
Yeah.
Which again, adds like you can't just have everything everywhere all at once. You might have your cavalry army that heads out to the plains, whilst your infantry base army is trying to go through the city.
I like that these are expansions. That these aren't. Hey, here's lots and lots of rules that you can
Oh
use.
yeah,
These are can almost modular additions. I think that's quite nice that they
yeah.
recognise that and add it
Depending
on that
on
basis.
depending on your experience, you might not want to dive into all these. You might do,
Mm,
because the final one's campaign rosters, or you might just not like aspects of it. So campaign rosters is you create a much larger points worth list of a roster, and you draw from that when you create your armies for each
mm,
fight. Which you might think, actually, I like army markers. I think that's a cool idea. Do I want to be bothered with that complexity of it and having more markers down? Maybe, but it's not really a major issue for me personally. Victory boons, yep, cool, crack on. I think they're generally okay. Maybe there is some exploitation you can do with that, so it might depend on your playing group. System warfare, maybe. Like that's a flavourful thing as much as anything else. Campaign rosters, that's like how much am I into this whole kind of resource
mm,
management of the whole campaign? Do you go further in that? Because there's four there. Um, these are basic starter points. Like again, I'm sure we will get more down the line, but
mm.
do you do
Or even giving you examples of how you might create your own as well.
do you do attrition with the campaign
Mm.
rosters? Or how much attrition do you do and things like that? Uh, it's it's an interesting one to play around with. There we go. So I like them. I like them. They all add into to the missions, to the campaign. And then there's a number of missions there. I'm not going to get into the missions too much, but there are some funky deployments. So you've got like what we got, ambush with a classic defenders across the middle. Ambush missions can be quite tricky. This one, it feels like the victory points scored will make it less obnoxious than quite a few, like the 30k ambush one is a bit interesting. What we got, strong point defense is a
Sort of layered
like
defense one, isn't it? Yeah.
layered defense. Again, we've seen that plenty of time in various game systems. Planetary assault is as it is. Everything's coming down in the air, baby. Um, or
Yeah.
or
Does
outflanking, to be
present quite a
fair.
cool graphic where it's just all
Yeah,
defender.
the attacker is not starting on the table. And the defender can deploy anywhere but the very edges of the table. It's like 3 inches from any edge.
Mm,
So, yeah, that's a fundamentally different way to play the game, which is quite cool. And and then within this, they've got the conquest campaign, the named conquest campaign itself.
yes.
So,
It's
if
almost like a
you're
worked example, isn't it? Yeah.
absolutely, you've got a layout of the hex in a really simple Settlers of Catan format. You've even got a printable map on the back, or
Mm,
that labels it specifically where certain areas are. They've got a sudden death victory condition. If the traitors take the hive city and the 6 surrounding hexes around it, the game's over. And then they've got a new territory specific for this fight, which is a mag rail terminus, which allows you to, as whoever controls it, to be able, or the attacker, if they control it, to attack the inner city without needing to go through the outer city to get there. And that terminal has its own mission which you must play as well. So,
mm.
like 4 or 5 pages. What was it? 5 pages on that campaign thing to add on to everything to make a unique campaign. Really quite efficient.
Yeah,
And
that's a good word for it, because it doesn't feel like it's been over egged. I think
it's not
sometimes
simple.
campaign sections can look a bit.
Yeah.
You think, oh my god, there's so much here, and if you're into that, brilliant. But it can be intimidating. Feels like it's the right balance. I think it actually feels quite light, it's quite lean. As a section, it's the leanest section of the book, and I think it benefits from that. I think because that's not easy to do. I think it would be all too easy for someone writing this as an author to just go off on one and be like, right, I'm going to pack this with every idea I've ever had. This looks like it's had a lot of the fat trimmed away.
Well, potentially as well moving forward. So this is for one city fight basically, but moving forwards into another book where they haven't had to spend time on how to play the campaigns. They can add in slightly more expansion rules, and they can have a more detailed campaign or a larger campaign section within that, utilizing that same space, which wouldn't be a bad thing in my opinion.
Agreed.
So
and then it moves into this whole new game mode.
Indeed, yes. Then the contentious one before we get to rules for new units and what have you. Titan Death. Oh, Titan Death, that's the name of an Adeptus Titanicus book. Well, this is a new way to use Titans, but it's very much Legions Imperialis. So what does this mean going forwards? Well, there are 3 new rules if you wish to play a Titan Death game. That is coordinated fire, and these will make sense as we go through stuff. So coordinated fire. When you choose targets, you fire weapons individually. So currently, as it stands, you fire all of the Titans, all of the weapons in a thing, and the Titan player or you get to choose how you take them. So if I fire my volcano cannon and a Gatling blaster and Apocalypse missile launchers, oh no, your big volcano cannon's scary. I will take that on my shields, and it's quite a powerful kind of defensive role if you can't bring the shields down any other way, that kind of thing. Well, in this one, you get more choice over how you order your attacks, so you can bring shields down, which I don't know how we do this with regards to Adeptus Titanicus, because this is not Adeptus Titanicus. It's not even halfway to Adeptus Titanicus.
It's nowhere near.
A couple of steps down that path from Legions Imperialis. It's very much Legions Imperialis with just a slight increase in kind of importance of the Titans themselves. Granularity, a very small amount. So coordinated fire is the first part of that. Calibrated void shields is the second part. Every time a void shield comes down on a 5+, it does not come down. So you might only have 2 void shields, but they could stay around for a long time if you're managing your voids level and your void levels well, and you're lucky. And again, I'm not going to compare anything to Titanicus where I don't have to, frankly. So
well, no, they've also, interestingly, they commented on this is partially addressed on a Warcom article recently where they were promoting this book, and they had one of the designers on and speaks about it, and he mentions both this game mode's position compared with Legions, which obviously gives you access to everything and is the core game and at this scale, and comparing it with Titanicus, which has considerably different. It's a completely different mechanic.
Yeah,
it's not in any way presented as a replacement to that. It's a totally different way of dealing with it.
But the fact you've got Titans Titans and Knights on a battlefield means people are going to compare it, and I just don't think you should. Well,
no, perfect. I can understand why someone would do that.
I understand why,
Yeah.
and visually, yes, but as a game, I don't think it helps. As talking on this podcast, I don't think it helps people to make any connections in that respect. Like, just get Titanicus out of your head. Like, Titanicus is a game. It's complicated. It has It has cards that you need with markers in 5 different locations on those cards to keep track of everything. It has mana pool rules and all that aren't in here. Like that is your in-depth breakdown game where every little thing matters. Firing your volcano cannon, you might decide 20 seconds trying to work out whether you can afford to fire it or not. Like this is not that game, and they're great, and it's not close to that game, and that's good.
Yeah,
In
I
that
agree. I
respect.
think it's distinct, and I think it's
Yeah,
worth mentioning in from that respect because I can see how people would think, well,
yeah,
how does
yeah.
this sit?
Because people are worried this is going to replace the Dead Titanicus. This doesn't replace the Dead It's fundamentally different. This is very much Legions Imperialis, but without your little troops. Okay. The third rule is focused ire, and Titans cannot make use of Spitfire rule unless every weapon they are firing is only targeting knight detachments. That's cool. I like that. It's a nice little thing. So, Titan Death. We'll run through this. So there's 3 missions that you can choose from: Domination, Breakthrough, Point of Conflict. You muster armies. The standard points limit for Titan Death, and it's standard again. People are saying, oh, it's minimum 6,000 points. It's not at all. It's standard. It's 6,000 points. However, players can agree whatever points limit you want. Yeah, you can go up to 20,000 points if you want, or you can have 3,000 points. It's going to affect what you can bring. What a warlord's around 600, isn't it, in this game? So you can have 10 warlords. You can have plenty of warhounds and some warlords and some reavers and some warbringers and some warmasters. Absolutely. Plenty of options within that. 6,000 points is cool, though. It's a lot of Titans. 10 Warlords is a lot of Titan.
It really is.
It really is. And we'll get onto that. Declare allegiance, choose formations, whether you want lances and legion support. You so you ignore basically, yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Ignore the restrictions for allies and things like that. Engine killer weaponry. Now, this is an interesting one, which is quite a clever way, I think, of trying to add some balance into it. Basically, if you've got the engine killer rule on any gun or any ranged weapon, if it's on a weapon with a profile characteristic of dash, you ignore it. It's fine, crack on. If it's on any ranged weapon, you multiply the increased by the engine killer value of all weapons in that detachment added together to form a single total, which is then multiplied by 10 to determine the final points. So in their example, Lee, who I hope is Lee Marshall,
I thought that.
um,
I thought it's got to
it's
be,
got to
hasn't it?
be, hasn't it? Yeah, it definitely has to be. So he's got a Reaver with what's he got? A Chain Fist and an Apocalypse missile launcher and a volcano cannon. So it has the Reaver Chain Fist. You ignore that Titan Killer rule. So he ends up with a total of Titan Killer 3, which he then times by 10. So that Reaver costs 30 points more. So if you have a effective Titan killing Titan set up, then it's going to cost more than one that has lesser weaponry designed to kill infantry. Makes sense? There's no infantry. Still
Makes
half
perfect sense. Exactly. It's
decent. It's
more
nice.
effective in this particular game mode, therefore it should cost more.
Yeah. Set up some terrain. Cool. Rules on that if you want it. Place objective markers. There's a whole new points scoring table for objectives, which is cool based on which Titans you are. Where is that? That's a bit scrolled further down. So we've got War Masters of either class R5, basically goes in height. Warlords, Warlord Sinister 4, Warbringer Reaver 3, Warhound Direwolf 2, any Knights 1. So big Titans hold objectives well. And then you got secondary objectives. Cool. Declare reserves. That's pretty normal. Deploy forces. Battle begins. There we go. Determine victory. Score victory points. All pretty normal. It's a normal game. Claiming objectives. Cool. Sort of similar. But that's fundamentally the game.
Yes. Which is not.
It's nothing.
You're not learning a new game, but it's just
No.
a game mode that I think really I mean, the idea that it's almost like it's not even like, I mean, it's not actually not that good an analogy, but people describing it a bit like apocalypse, and you think, well, yeah, no, not quite, because apocalypse went different iterations of it, went in a very different direction. It's just a game that allows you to play. You think I've got a collection of knights, and potentially I could see this working really well if there's, say, you could imagine this being a doubles game where you realise that amongst your group, four of you have got a fair few titans between you. You divide them up on both sides, and away you go. But it allows you to play a game pretty rapidly, whereas the equivalent game in Titanicus would take forever.
So
it wouldn't be fun. It just allows you to have a
yeah,
lot of titans and knights, and it be really good fun. It simplifies it.
the apocalypse analogy becomes due to the amount of points you're putting on the table. Is it a big game of like 40k Apocalypse? Not really, because 40k Apocalypse was a different style of game. Blah blah blah. This is Legions of Paris without the little stuff. So it kind of it sort of is. It's the problem with Apocalypse. It didn't simplify that much for 40k.
No,
So
it was
that's
a
why. But it's
variation.
the scale is the important thing. So if you put 10 warlords down on the table in Adeptus Titanicus, I'm just going to talk warlords here because, again, if you've got a mix of Warhounds, Reavers, and warlords, it's way more than 10 models on the table. You have got to find somewhere to put 10 warlord cards with all their tokens to know which warlord's which, to keep a track of all that stuff. And there is an argument that Adeptus Titanicus can be very killy when you get lots of big stuff like that, but it also Titans can absorb damage, so it can take a while to kill a Titan in Adeptus Titanicus. And all the time you're moving stuff and you're paying attention to all the minor details of, oh, this one's got a reactor leak. This one has to, like, it's got damage stabilizer and must turn to its right at the end of the turn. And this one can't give orders. And this one, blah 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 blah. Blah. And you've got all the orders as well, which complicate things. And you've got mana pool rules, and you'll have to keep track of, well, these titans in different mana pools, and therefore these have these rules, these have these rules, and they're linked to these titans only, but not to these titans, and then you've got Legio rules to add on top of that as well. So that there's a lot of moving parts, and a big game of this with, say, 17 titans of different sizes would take a long time, would require a lot of space, a lot of brain power, and that's not a bad thing. But that is not everyone's thing and requires time and space that not everyone has as well. What this game allows you to do is go, cool, let's put down 17 titans on my side, 17 on your side. Oh, just need to make sure we've got something to keep track of shields and wounds on each individual titan. And we just use Legions Imperialis rules. And, okay, this one moves, shoots, boom, done. Cool. Are you damaged or are you not? Yeah, no. Yeah, when you blow up in Titanic, even just blowing up in Titanicus can have 5, 6 different effects. In this one,
and that's
do I
part
do
of
more?
the fun.
Yeah,
But you couldn't
absolutely.
keep track of all of that here. I mean, the amount of damage you'd have to keep track of would be a nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely. So this allows you to have huge games using massive Titan collections and have them work in a way which doesn't require you to have a weekend off. And as I say,
and
and you know,
hire a hall.
a double garage like that's with no cars in it to be able to play in it. The other thing it allows you to do is, cool, I want to play with 5 Titans. You have 5 Titans. If we play Titanicus, that's potentially a 2.5 hour to 45 3 hour game, depending on how quickly you play. In this, that could be that's a skirmish. So that's maybe an hour and a half, potentially. So, we haven't got much time at club night, but I want to play Titans. Cool, let's just play this one. Let's just throw Titans at each other. Much more beer and pretzel, much more chilled out. Or I'm just knackered and I don't want to have to think about all the.
Hugely appealing. I can imagine me playing it at the club in town. I could imagine this just being a really appealing way to play it. It's not saying, well, I want to play it every time. I love the crunchiness of some of those other games, but I think as an option, it's one you didn't have before. Legions Imperialis in its standard form just didn't allow it, wasn't suited to it, and this does. And it's I think it's a really useful addition. I really do. I think they've executed it really well.
Within that, I think where this might shine is Adepticon. After a day of gaming, people are playing that, and then people want to chat, have a few drinks, relax. 9 o'clock in the evening. Cool. Do you want to throw some Titans on the table? And I don't have to concentrate, so I can still talk to my mates. I can still play a game, roll dice, all that kind of thing. It could become a really good convention game for people who either are heavily into Titanicus and have a lot, or into Legions Imperialis and have somehow started to collect Titans and want to do that kind of thing. Super cool idea. The missions are pretty simple. Like first one's just 4 objectives across the table. They're
they've spaced out the objectives in a way that just makes a bit more sense with Titans moving
scoring
around.
by round.
Right.
They're just different sets of objectives with slightly different points for where those objectives are, and then the secondaries again nice and simple. Like there's nothing overly
but nice that they exist. Yeah.
So
I'm slightly surprised, but I think it was the right decision. I think I'm slightly surprised that super heavy tanks aren't included in this, but it would dilute it. I think the idea of it limiting it to knights and titans, I think was a good move. I think actually it's sort of tempting to have things like shadow swords and Titan relevant vehicles moving around that are potentially tougher or larger than a knight is. Could be expanded to include it. Of course, you can do whatever you like, but I think I quite like just limiting it to this. I think it keeps the idea of what the game is.
They also don't have many super heavy vehicles out at the moment. So
no, true.
In 3 or 4 books' time, like Titan Death 2, call it something slightly different, which adds super heavies into this. Again, bridges another gap, because the one thing this does for Games Workshop is you've got 2 Warhounds when you bought your book. Okay, cool. Buy a Warlord. Okay, you might have you got 1,200 points of Titans there. Or just if you buy a Reaver, because you might want to use a Reaver in a game. Oh, all of a sudden you've got a small Titan Death Force that you could play, and that can grow. Oh, now you've got an Adeptus Titanicus force. Did you ever play Adeptus Titanicus? And it works the other way, bringing Adeptus Titanicus people slightly towards Legions Imperialis. And if you add in, down the future, if you did add in super heavies, because it would be cool to have some shadow swords out there, like hiding in a building, ready to ruins of a building, ready to snipe out something. Limit it. You don't. The whole point of this is not to bog down the game in lots of different activations.
No, exactly. You want to keep it quite simple.
And maybe you, in that kind of thing, you'd say they have to be like minimum point size units. So you'd have to have say 4 shadow swords in a detachment to be allowed to choose them. That kind of thing could work. And again, if you've got people who play AT who play this every now and then all of a sudden, there's a reason to go and buy a shadow sword box, a whatever box, a glaive box, a fellblade. Then all of a sudden, well, you're halfway to making a Legions Imperialis army. So what, as a
it's the buy increments that will get you. It's like, I'll just get one of those because then I can do this. Oh, but now I've got that. If I just get one more of this, just one more, it's a good way to go. But it's actually quite a good way of doing the hobby. Frankly, it's quite a good way of exploring something, scratching an itch. I could see that being expanded to that, and I think I'd be all for that.
Yeah, I want to play this game. I say as an easy, less taxing. I've had a hard week. I want to roll dice. I still want to use Titans. I think it could work really, really, really well. So Titan Death gets a thumbs up for me. I'm not worried as an AT player that if AT has issues, then there'll be AT issues, not because they've bought this game out.
Agreed.
Cool. And then on top of all of that, we get some new formations and detachments. So, I'm not going to go massively into it. I haven't played enough Legions, really. Played bits and pieces. But it is cool to have a little look. We've got...
before we dive into it, speaking anecdotally, this, I think, was the thing that most people I have seen, both those in my local groups and those you see talking more generally online, this is what people were most excited about, or perhaps most anticipating out of the whole
Yeah,
book.
I think that's.
I think hopefully they'll be pleasantly surprised that the book is a well-rounded set. But I mean, this is what people were excited for, because it's massively expanding the game and what can be
So
done in the
the
game.
main point of this book is to be a Legions Imperialis book. This adds into what you can do in Legions Imperialis. We still, even after this book, there are lots of gaps to fill in that kind of make up armies. Campaigns are campaigns, and they're cool, but a lot of people make their own, as you said. And then the Titan Death currently for Legions Imperialis players probably doesn't affect too many of them if they don't already play AT anyway. So yeah, you're right on that one. Legion Sky Hunter Phalanx. So I'm not going to go into all the rules, but basically you get Legion Scimitars, Land Speeders, and Javelins as your compulsories, and they gain outflank, which is pretty awesome. It's cool. The drop pod assault is everything that can take. All legions must be upgraded with legion drop pods as dedicated transports. All legions start as detachments with a formation that contain only walker models must take dreadnought drop pods as standard. Cool. So you got it's a way to build a dreadnought. A drop pod assault army. Nothing fancy, but does the job. Were there any kind of units that stood out? Yeah, or
Units.
detachments, or should I say?
I think it is I was just thinking about it because, as you say, the formations, and I think the expansion of formations is going to be a cool part. As you realise quite how flexible the formations
Sure.
are, and whether or not is it better to have big formations, a few big formations, or lots of small ones. I think that's going to become some of the interesting part of army creation. Standout ones, I think the Spartans are going to have a huge impact on
big
the game.
time. I think like seeing more people bring some Terminators and stuff like that, and it's also going to help. Like, don't get me wrong, the Outriders look fun, the Scimitars look fun, Land Speeders cool. I mean, Land Speeders for the multi melter.
Yeah,
Options are going to be good
and I
for.
think similarly, javelins are cool models. Javelins, big squadrons of javelins
Yeah,
and scimitar jet bikes are
I
going to look
think
amazing.
this is where, like I say, we've said before, the game needs a lot more to come out before a meta settles. But the ability to have movement 10 speeders and bikes that can have flamers on to ignore cover or at big anti-tank weaponry and get it into position is going to be really good. The Spartan again changes things because you can have, I mean, it's what 82 points per model if you go for all the las cannons, and and you're going to start. It can 5 models can go in there. You're going to
Yeah, that's
start rolling
huge.
them up the table
I thought it would only be
with 2 wounds
4.
with a 2+
Yeah.
save. You know, yeah, you're going to start seeing some assault armies. I think potentially more important for that, and then drop pods. Of course, you can start seeing a whole different way of playing really with those, and the Palisades look really cool with that. I think one of the most important ones here is actually for solar, and we'll get into that because they can have.
Oh yes,
So
yes,
they
I
got
agree.
artillery. They can shoot. They do not suffer the
I
-1
cannot
for line of
wait.
sight, which is cool. But it's the Dracosans and
Yes.
the options they have for transporting people. That's going to fund it. Like solar, even the solars with axes who roll the extra dice in combat, they will ruin Space Marines. I killed almost all of them out of a unit with Overwatch from Rhinos because they're hitting on normal and their armor's thin as anything. So they need that protection to get in. Yeah, which is cool. I
I
think
think
that's the big one.
the artillery companies are going to look amazing. I
Oh
think
yeah,
I'm really excited to see those. When you see those in this game, and you have real heavy artillery blocks set up in this game, I think that's going to change how people do things. I agree with you. I mean, in terms of that, for both sides, both factions, I should say. The transports massive in terms of what that's going to do to the game. The super heavy formation is quite an interesting addition. I felt the variant Malcadors are nice to see because they're kind of eccentric. It feels like a lot of those things, like the various weapon batteries, the little sort of static weapon batteries, like a lot of people have been asking for the anti-air, which this introduces, but it's the artillery and the transports, I think, are probably the biggest impact this is going to have.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Do the template rules ignore Firestorm? Do they ignore cover? I'd have to look it up on the book because the Malcadors don't. The weapon itself doesn't ignore cover. I'm assuming it's on the Firestorm rule or something like that. Because again, it's getting stuff out of buildings. People are putting a lot of stuff in that kind of thing. But yeah, there's expanding on what we have to create that more rounded game. Is going to be a good thing. It's going to take a while because we're not going to get everything. So,
No, it's going to take a few books to get out everything for sure. That's before you start mixing in other factions. But yeah.
Yes. Cool. Wonderful stuff. I'm just trying to think.
And that rounds it out.
Yeah.
Actually, it finishes on that.
I just
some cool army shots.
I don't think there was anything more we're going to. The artillery seems really cool. Like, again, it creates a different. They can sit at the back. Suddenly, outflanking speed becomes more important. You're going to need to think about your army. Yeah, I think the book's really good. I say I haven't read a huge amount of the background. I'm working my way through it, and what I've read is really good. It's, to be honest, what I expect from specialist games in terms of their heresy content.
So that they've maintained that, and I think it has. You said it earlier. It's a happy medium, and I think I'm pleased that they have a happy medium. They've achieved that between the resource-intensive, massive time it used to take to do the black books, as wonderful as a resource as they but equally the lighter books, which were coming more frequently. I think this is a good place for that, and I would recommend that background to people for reading it through. The way it's presented, I think, is very good. The way it's written is very good. I was excited when they announced this book and what it was going to contain, and it's delivered on that.
We should also, absolutely, it is really cool.
Would recommend.
We should also say that we got sent the Legions Astartes support box and the solar one as well. So I haven't had a chance to build these because of events, but I've got the sprues right in front of me for the Legions Astartes, and I love these. I love the sprues for this game. They're just fantastic.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And I'm looking at like of course it's essentially doubled up, but the Leviathans.
The Marine one is interesting because it's got those different designs for the support weapons, the rapiers.
Yeah,
I thought that was they're quite different to the look of them. Obviously, very similar, but they are different to their larger cousins. And you've got the weapon batteries, which I know a lot of people have been keen on. You have those anti-air emplacements. I think people are quite keen on those because air power seems to be it's a thing which you counter with your own air power, but to have something on the ground that's going to deal with those either in the form of the radios or the support weapons is quite good. I have put together some of the I've put together one complete frame. So I had a flavour of all of them, including the incredibly cute little Cyclops things, which I'm amazed that they included those. But I love the way they work and these things that were trundling along and going to just detonate in people's faces. He's done these little things just trundling out and going for it. But the weapon emplacements, I think, look super cool. Makes me think of games like Aeronautica and something like this, but aircraft trying to thread the needle between these SAM sites that you're going to be able to set up with those, and the support weapons they're quite fiddly. There's quite a few bits to them.
I'm looking at the dreadnoughts, and like the contemptors were bad enough. I think these might be slightly better, but I'm looking at large because they're the Leviathans particularly are a bit chunky. I'm trying to see if the guns, the claws all in one piece. There are some bits where I'm like, oh, do I have to put a half of a leg onto a foot? Okay, that's cool. No, I have to put. Yeah, you do. Okay, it's rubbish. Or in fact, no, I think you have a foot and then you have the armor plates on each side of it for one of them. But there's nothing quite as small as the back of the fist for the Contemptor. Thank heavens for that. So small mercies.
It's a cool little set. It's a set that I wonder if they, because the rules for these are in the they're in the main rule book. I sort of imagine that was originally intended to kind of come alongside that. But yeah. But then there are pictures in this book, so yeah, who knows? But yeah, really keen to see that Dracoson and the artillery come out. I'm really looking forward to those. I think there's going to be quite a few of those on
for sure.
my future shopping list.
Awesome stuff. So yeah, looking forward to ordering my own copy of the book, which will be usable going forwards, and setting some hobby budget aside for that one. I've got an order to make with Element, so I might try and get it through Element. We'll see how stock goes on that front. But yeah, exciting times.
Cool book. Yeah, I think they do smash this. They've done a great job.
I think we'll leave it there then. We will be back start-ish of the month as well with our normal episode. So more Titan talk, which will be good.
We'll cover all of the Titan fun and games. Good to talk to you, Greg. Speak to you soon.